We got Second Sabine Pass, September 8, 1863, was a failed Union Army attempt to invade the Confederate state of Texas. France was openly sympathetic to the Confederate States of America early in the war, but never matched his sympathy with diplomatic or military action. After Mexican forces were defeated by French forces in the summer of 1863, Mexican President Benito Juarez escaped the capital, and the French installed Austrian Maximilian as emperor. Emperor of Mexico.
Emperor of Mexico. With the de facto French government bordering Texas on the south across the Rio Grande, the Confederates hoped to establish a formal route between Texas and Mexico, by way of which the Confederacy would obtain much-needed supplies. But Abraham Lincoln from the Union was like, I see what you guys are doing there, and I am going to send an expedition to establish a military presence in Texas. And I'm also going to discourage Maximilian from opening trade with them rebs.
Yeah, can't be having that.
The military federal force was commanded by Major General Nathaniel P. Banks, a political general with little discernible command ability. Banks' original intent was to launch a combined Army-Navy campaign in northwest Louisiana.
Yeah, well, we already know how much the Army and Navy work together.
Not very much.
The Union plan was to send Union Navy warships from the Mississippi up the tributary Red River, which was navigable upstream as far as where the boundaries of the Confederate states of Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas came together. The Union had effected its capture of New Orleans May 1st, 1862, and after the July 3rd Vicksburg defeat, the Union military had better control of both the east and west banks of the mouth of the Mississippi. Unusually low water in the Red River at this time, however, prevented even relatively low draft Union gunboats from operating effectively, and the anticipated overland Union invasion of Texas was further delayed.
Damn right it was. And the Union right now is on a riding a big old high after getting Vicksburg and Gettysburg. They're like, yeah, we can do anything. Let's go to Texas.
Yeah.
Consequently, General Banks ordered his subordinate, Major General William Franklin, who would coordinate with the United States Navy. He said, enter the Sabine River from the Gulf of Mexico and defeat that small Confederate detachment at Fort Sabine on the river's west bank, which is the Texas side, at the Sabine Pass, about 2 miles upstream of the river mouth. The key United States Navy target in the first battle of Sabine Pass was the original earthworks thrown up on the Texas bank of the Sabine River, about 3 miles south of the Sabine City. A tiny town with some wharfs on the east side of its main street, which are the little docks or whatever.
Type deals, yeah. U.S. Army battle plan was that after the U.S. Navy gunboats silenced the guns of Fort Sabine, the wave of about 200 U.S. Army infantrymen riding the deck of one of the main fleet's reserve gunboats would debark immediately below, which is east of the fort, and effected the fort's surrender. The main fleet, less than 5 miles offshore and well beyond Confederate gunfire, contained as many as 20 vessels, which carried U.S. Army regulars, as many as 5,000 of them, according to official records. A small artillery was also included. Company-sized initial landing force was then to take Sabine City and secure the area for the main force.
Damn right it was. After the main force was landed and united with the initial assault company, the intention was to march a few miles north to the railroad and cut the railroad between Houston and Beaumont. Once this was done, the Army force would march east, presumably destroying all rail line as it went, and then attack Beaumont. This action would deny Sabine Pass and the natural shallow water harbor Sabine Lake upstream from the Gulf about 6 miles to blockade runners.
All right. Well, considering the dominant size of the Union Expeditionary Force, taking control of Sabine Pass and environs was not expected to be a great challenge to the forces.
Oh, of course.
To prevent intervention from the Confederate forces in Louisiana, that consisted of Brigadier General Thomas Greene's 1st Cavalry and Brigadier General Alfred Mouton's infantry.
His bum is on your lips.
Right. If you're lucky, you just might give it a little kiss, Albert Mouton. The Union Division of Major General Francis J. Huron moved to Morganza as a diversion, which precipitated in the Battle of Sterling's Plantation, which we'll have.
Right, it did, and damn right we will. Fort Sabine had been renamed Fort Griffin in honor of an earlier commander, which was Confederate Lieutenant Colonel W.H. Griffin. Although this was not shown on Union maps since the first battle of Sabine Pass in late September 1862. Who cares?
Oh, okay.
It's the same fort, people know. The Confederate detachment residing at the Sabine Pass fort was the Jeff Davis Guards, named for Confederate President Jefferson Davis.
Oh, Jeffrey.
You think he like Jeffrey, Jeff, or Jefferson?
I think Jefferson. I don't think anybody called it Jeff. Like Timothy. It was always Timothy's, not like Tim.
Right. They
Probably.
Never called Jefferson on Married Children Jeff.
Right. I don't know. how that guy came to your mind, but yeah.
That's the only ever Jefferson I ever heard of.
Besides the Jeffersons.
Right. A company of mostly Irish American men from Houston and Galveston area, which was the Jeff Davis Guards, and they had recently merged into the 1st Texas Heavy Artillery.
All right, they were stationed at the Hastily-built earthworks a mile upstream, which was north on the southwest bank of the pass. When the battle began with the Union gunboats' bombardment on September 8th at the fort were 46 men, all but 2 or 3 were members of the Davis Guard.
Oh.
Under the immediate command of Lieutenant Richard W. Dowling, the Davis Guards had mounted their unit's 6 old smoothbore cannon on the elevated platform of the small earthen fort.
They might be old,
but they'll still do. And they're smoothbore, though, so they ain't going very far.
Although unimpressive to Union observers and scouts, the fort's guns position were high enough to afford a clear view to the horizon for many, many miles. The flat marshland stretched northeastward into Louisiana, and then also westward towards Houston, and then southwestward towards Galveston, also northward towards Port Arthur and Beaumont, and then southeastward into the Gulf of Mexico.
Hey, they went everywhere.
Went everywhere. The nearest observation point affording a view of Fort Griffin, other than from the mast top of a naval vessel seaward of the pass, was the Sabine Pass Lighthouse on the Louisiana side of the Sabine Pass at the mouth of the Sabine River. And we all know the Union took care of Louisiana.
Well, some of it.
Right.
On the afternoon of September 8th, U.S. Navy Lieutenant Frederick Crocker, who was acting captain, was in command of the advanced squadron composed of 4 gunboats. Crocker was a veteran officer of considerable recent experience in Union River gunboat actions and blockade duty. His ship was the USS Clifton, which is a steam-powered sidewheeler. Besides the Clifton, you had Crocker's advanced squadron that included Granite City, Sachem, and Arizona, all recently commissioned ironclad warships.
Nice.
Less than 3 miles southeast, downriver, well out of range of the Confederates' fort's cannons, were anchored 7 U.S. Navy transports carrying most of the Army soldiers of the landing force that was to be, or hopefully to be.
Well, they couldn't even come even close.
Right.
The USS Suffolk, hosting invasion force commander U.S. Army Major General Franklin and his staff, headed the 7-vessel squadron. Outside the principal Gulf Shore sandbar, an additional 2 miles downstream of this squadron, lay an anchor the remaining ships of the 22-vessel invasion fleet. The cited contemporary United States Army map, it shows the nominal positions of the bombardment fleet of 4, the 7 ships of the transport squadron, and the relative position farther out in the Gulf of the remaining vessels.
I would hope so.
The official reports of the battle generally reflects the map's information.
I would hope so.
I mean, that's why you did it.
Jeez. The total number of Union infantry assault troops in the landing force, like we said, was as many as 5,000 infantrymen, which included 500 listed as aboard the Granite City. These aboard the 6 troop transports and the 7-ship squadron headed by Suffolk, plus an artillery company somewhere among them. The first wave of 500 men aboard Granite City, which steamed as close behind Clifton as possible, but out of range of the fort's guns, were to land in the open space adjacent to and downstream of the fort.
All right. Well, this was a flat, often muddy area, already cleared of brush by the old ribs, as a clear field of fire for the canister and grape of the fort's artillery. The United States Army invasion plan, therefore, absolutely required that the Confederate guns be silenced before any troops were debarked. This engagement was to be the largest amphibious assault on an enemy territory in the history of the United States military up to this date. Leon Smith, who was at Beaumont, Texas, immediately ordered all Confederate troops into Beaumont.
I wonder if that amphibious assault stayed the largest until, obviously, D-Day, right?
Most likely, right?
Probably.
No, the United States military didn't do anything that day. That just got blown up.
D-Day?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Pearl Harbor.
Oh, sorry.
Storming the beaches of Normandy, man.
Right.
I had to. That's still the largest amphibious assault to this day, but was there a larger one after this and before that? Is what I'm saying.
It's very possible. Immediately ordered all Confederate... Leon Smith, who was at Beaumont, he ordered all Confederate troops into Beaumont. Some 80 men. Oh, give me all.
Give me every one of them.
He ordered all the men aboard the steamer Roebuck and sent them down the river to reinforce Fort Griffin.
All right, Smith and a Captain Good rode to the fort on horseback, reaching the fort some 3 hours before the steamer, arriving just as the Union gunboats Clifton and Sachem came within range and assisted in the defense of the fort. Dowling's well-practiced Irish Texan artillerymen, whose chosen and officially approved unit name was the Jeff Davis Guards, had placed range stakes in 2 narrow and shallow river channels. These were the Texas Channel near the southwest shore and the Louisiana Channel against the Louisiana shore.
5 to 7 feet, dude. That's perfect river for swimming.
Right.
I want to go canoeing on that one. The white painted stakes were for determining accurate range of the fort's guns. 6 old smoothbore cannons. Each Davis Guard's gun crew during gunnery practice thereby worked to predetermine the approximate charge, which was the amount of gunpowder needed for each type projectile available for their specific gun, which was either a ball, a canister, or a grape shot, and which specific guns and charges and loads had the best potential to hit each range stake. Once they figured that shit out, they're like, come on in.
They were prepared.
The Union's Crocker Squadron had no local river pilots, only general knowledge of the river's channels, no assurance of locations of the constantly varying depths, especially of the large oyster shell, which is reefs or banks between the river's 2 channels. Regarding this battle, no mention is found in an official United States Navy report of whether Union sailors were making observations and taking depth soundings from the gunboats, which are now dangerous top decks, while the Confederate cannon shots pounded and shook their ships.
The few maps to which they had access were old and outdated or could not account for recent changes in river bottom conditions.
It's their fault.
On Captain Crocker's signal, the Sachem, followed by the Arizona, advanced up the right channel on the Louisiana side as fast as they dared, firing their port side guns at the fort. Clifton approached in the lead, ascending the Texas Channel at full speed, though. I said getting there fast.
You ain't getting. Granite City hovered out of range behind Clifton, having orders not to risk debarking the 500 assault troops until the fort surrendered or its guns were silenced. As Sachem entered among the range stakes, the Confederates opened fire. Then Clifton came into range, followed by Arizona. Despite their old smoothbore cannons, one of which had just become inoperable. After only a few rounds, it was obvious to Confederate artillerymen's months of training and target practice was an astounding success as their aim was deadly accurate.
Deadly. The Confederates ended up capturing the Clifton and the Sachem with a total of 13 heavy cannon.
Nice.
Damn, including at least 2 new potent Parrott rifles.
Hey, they needed these.
Right, which were handed over to Leon Smith's Texas Marine Department prompt. Union casualties amounted to 24 killed and badly wounded, about 37 missing, 315 Navy men captured.
Damn.
The combined Union Army and Navy invasion force withdrew and returned to New Orleans.
Bet they did.
The Confederates had 0 casualties.
Makes sense. In recognition of this old victory, the Rebs Congress passed a resolution of special thanks to the officers and the men of the Davis Guard. In addition, Houston residents raised funds to provide medals to the Guard. The Davis Guard's medals were made from silver Mexican pesos by smoothing off the coins, then hand stamping and hand engraving on one side, the battle name and the date on the other side, which initials DG and a cross patty,
right?
Cross patty, yeah.
It's like the
cross,
the
medal.
What are those guys called?
Yeah,
the Crusaders and all that, the cross.
Right. The medals were hung on green ribbons and presented to the members of the Davis Guard.
Clearly.
The official Confederate silver medals were presented in a public ceremony years later.
Oh, good for them. Well, a year later.
Just a year later. Months later.
Right. The Battle of Sabine Pass was of moderate tactical or strategic significance to the war. It was successful in ensuring that the anticipated overland Union invasion of Texas was delayed indefinitely.
Right.
Confederate supply line from Mexico to Texas had existed out of the port of Baghdad since the outbreak of the war, but was held by the increasingly isolated Mexican Republicans. By the time Imperial French and Mexican forces captured Baghdad in 1864, a supply line to anywhere in the Confederacy east of the Mississippi was no longer feasible on the account of Vicksburg being taken in July of 1863.
Once Vicksburg, oh man, I think Vicksburg was more than Gettysburg.
Clearly. At least to the east, the west of the Mississippi, because you ain't getting shit out there no more. Man. The Confederacy was therefore forced to continue its reliance on blockade running to import valuable materials and resources.